It was just another busy afternoon at the local gas station when two officers pulled up, their laughter echoing through the parking lot. They spotted a well-dressed black man pumping gas and decided to approach him, cracking jokes and asking questions like it was some kind of game. What they didn't know was that this man wasn't just any random civilian. He was about to become their new boss. Unaware of the storm they were walking into, the officers continued their playful taunts, oblivious to the shock that was about to hit them. The man stayed calm, his sharp eyes watching their every move, waiting for the right moment to speak. When the truth finally came out, the entire situation flipped on its head, leaving everyone stunned. What happens when power meets ignorance in the most unexpected way? Stay tuned to find out how this story unfolds. As the officers continued their routine, their tone was casual, almost dismissive, as if they didn't see the man as someone important. One of them chuckled, making an offhand comment about how quiet the gas station had been lately. The man nodded politely, his expression unreadable, but his sharp, calm demeanor hinted that he was far from ordinary. The man's car, a sleek black sedan with government plates, should have been the first clue, but the officers didn't seem to notice or care. They asked for his ID, half joking about running a background check. The man reached into his pocket without a word, handing it over. The younger officer glanced at the badge, his laughter trailing off. "Wait," he said, his voice unsteady. His partner leaned in, squinting at the words etched on the badge. Suddenly, the air grew heavier, and the officers realized they'd made a serious mistake. The younger officer's face turned pale as he reread the badge, his confidence slipping away. "Chief of Police," he whispered, glancing nervously at his partner. The realization hit them like a freight train. This wasn't just another civilian, and their so-called joke had taken a disastrous turn. Meanwhile, the man stood silently, observing their reactions with a calm authority that spoke volumes. His eyes scanned the pair, not with anger, but with an unnerving intensity that made them squirm. The older officer tried to recover, forcing an awkward laugh. "Just standard procedure, sir. You know how it is," he mumbled, but his voice betrayed his unease. What had started as a light-hearted encounter was now a tense standoff. Nearby, a few onlookers began to take notice, their quiet curiosity adding weight to the moment. The chief said nothing yet, letting the silence stretch, leaving the officers trapped in their own discomfort. The silence grew heavier, like a storm brewing on the horizon. The younger officer shifted nervously, his hands fidgeting with a flashlight on his belt. The older one, trying to mask his unease, forced a stiff smile. "Well, Chief, looks like everything checks out," he said, holding out the ID with a shaky hand. The chief took it back slowly, his movements deliberate, his eyes never leaving theirs. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. "Is this how you normally conduct yourself?" he finally asked, his voice calm but laced with authority. The officers exchanged a quick glance, searching for an excuse, but no words came. Nearby, a man refueling his truck paused, clearly sensing something unusual. The chief took a step closer, his presence commanding. "I spent years working to build trust in this community," he said evenly. "And in 5 minutes, you've given people a reason to doubt us." The officers stood frozen, unsure of how to respond. Just as the tension seemed unbearable, a squad car pulled into the gas station. The officers immediately straightened up, relief washing over them, until they saw who stepped out. It was Captain Daniels, a no-nonsense veteran with decades on the force, known for holding everyone accountable, no exceptions. "Chief," Daniels called out, his voice firm but respectful. He approached quickly, glancing between the two officers and the man they'd been questioning. The chief nodded slightly in acknowledgement, his expression still unreadable. Daniels turned to the officers, his sharp gaze narrowing. "You two care to explain what's going on here?" he demanded. The older officer stammered, trying to spin the situation, but Daniels wasn't buying it. Before they could dig themselves deeper, the chief spoke up. "No need for explanations right now, Captain. Let's focus on setting things right immediately. But there was more to his tone, something that hinted this situation was far from over. Captain Daniels straightened, his expression shifting to one of quiet determination. "Understood, Chief," he replied, his tone clipped but respectful. The two officers exchanged uneasy glances, sensing they were now under intense scrutiny. The chief took a step closer, his voice calm but commanding. "I could file a formal report right now," he began, his eyes fixed on the officers. "But I'd rather use this moment to teach you something, a lesson you won't forget." The younger officer, clearly shaken, blurted, "We didn't mean anything by it, sir. It was just misjudgment." The chief raised a hand, silencing him. "Misjudgment like this can cost trust, lives, and careers," he said firmly. "You don't get to make those kinds of mistakes." Just as the officers thought the worst was over, the chief turned to Daniels. "Captain, I'd like these two to join me for a week of community service at our outreach center. They'll see firsthand what respect and accountability look like." The officer's jaws dropped, stunned by the twist. The chief's measured approach wasn't about punishment, it was about change. The crowd that had gathered nodded approvingly as the chief's calm authority turned a tense moment into an unforgettable lesson. The officers stood in silence, processing what had just unfolded. The chief's approach wasn't harsh, but it carried a weight they couldn't ignore. Captain Daniels nodded firmly, signaling the message was clear. "You heard the chief," he said. "Report to the outreach center tomorrow morning." The chief turned to leave, but paused to address the gathering crowd. "We all have a responsibility to do better, for each other, and for this community. Change starts here." His words resonated, leaving a sense of hope in the air. As he walked back to his car, the officers exchanged a quiet look of realization. This wasn't just a lesson in accountability, it was a chance to rebuild trust and grow. The chief drove away, knowing his presence had already set a new tone for the department. Sometimes, the most powerful actions come not from anger, but from leading by example.